Geek Out! Welcome to another installment of From Geek Out with Love. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
I'm Rich.
I'm Garrett.
This week we're going to be talking about 1987's The Living Daylights, the first Bond film without Roger Moore since 1973.
Mm-hmm.
So, 14 years later, we've got... I'm just going to go ahead and knight him, Sir Timothy Dalton.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Jake's in it.
Yeah.
So, it's the first. It's a conscious effort to kind of bring the tone of the series back to its literary roots, but kind of not at the same time because there's some wacky shit that goes on. And
there's some wacky shit.
I think Rich and Garrett hadn't seen this film in like years. Garrett, you had never seen this film?
I had never seen this film,
which is wild to me because we lived together for like half a decade, and in that half decade I've always owned The Living Daylights.
Yeah, I don't know. I had never gotten around to it for whatever reason, and I'm, having watched it for the first time in preparation for this, I've got some thoughts.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Well,
they're mostly not bad thoughts. Like mostly I enjoyed it.
Well, since you're the neophyte or the least experienced in the ways of The Living Daylights, why don't you go ahead and take point for a moment?
So, like, if I didn't know it these days, I would not have believed that movie was made in the 80s, but for the crazy hair, because unlike some of the women in like the random cutscenes through, because no one has ever duplicated that hair, and for good reason. But this film, there's a lot of moments in it where I'm like, this is the film that someone would make if they were looking back and were like, if I wanted to make a film that screamed 80s, how would I do it? And like as a Bond for a Bond film. This is kind of a time capsule of like 80s cinema. It just feels like that kind of
a product of its era.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very much it's taking notes from the big blockbuster action movies that are starting to crop up around that time, have cropped up around that time, I guess. It's kind of weird because going in, we've talked a lot about Timothy Dalton, about how he's Bond's a killer. He's such a cold-hearted person, and like there's a lot of moments in this where he's just it's just kind of goofy. Like the one that stuck out to me was the last scene, or not the last scene, but like when the airplane is taken off from the base when Bond is escaping in it, and Kara is driving in the Bond girl is driving in the Jeep next to it and just like waving to him, and he looks back and like does a double take, and you can just see him go, "What the fuck?"
Literally, he mouths "What the fuck."
So there's also like the parrot that does the double take at one point, and then like cleans off its perch when the guy leaves his milk handler thing. Yeah. I mean, there's some goofy stuff that feels like it should have been in that kind of like weird mid Roger Moore where like.
Oh yeah, there's still some fallout of the Sir Roger Moore era. They hadn't cleansed yet, of the goofiness. And boy, do they cleanse! They definitely detox because the next one's not goofy at all.
No, not at all.
Yeah, they get rid of the goof.
So, Garrett, are you saying that this is like James Bond meets The Lost Boys meets Roadhouse meets Clue?
Meets basically every other movie that is from or referencing the 80s ever. Like there's a lot of, I don't know, it just feels more so than a lot of the other Bond films, which aside from some of the plot things about like the Soviet Union being around and that kind of thing, you couldn't see those kinds of ideas coming out in a more modern film. Like the only way that half of the stuff that happens in The Living Daylights would ever make it into a film these days is if someone was like explicitly trying to make an 80s film.
Michael Bay. He could do it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's stuff that like he wouldn't even do it like just Michael Bay. He would do it with like a big wink, and like he would personally attend the theater next to you and be like, "Hey, jabbing you in the ribs with his elbow, like, see what I did there? See what I did there?" It's very like I was saying at the top, if I didn't know that this was made in the 80s, I would have sworn that it was calling back to that. And even the subject matter of it like really dates it, because the idea that this whole scheme winds up having the Soviets and the West kind of working together. It happens in Spy Who Loved Me, but I mean, like the way that it happens in Living Daylights, the specifics of how all that comes together, I don't think that to me really dates the film to a very small window in time. That like to think that you've got the Soviets that could be treated in this way, even 2 or 3 years earlier, I don't think they would have done that.
It is probably the most Cold War-esque Bond film, period, because he goes to Afghanistan, he goes to like Prague, like height of Cold War Prague. He's dealing with Soviet defection. Schmerz Spionum from our old buddies Schmerz opens up the prologue. It's it's weird that it's kind of taken this long, and especially from a fucking series that has an entry called From Russia with Love, but this really is the most Cold War Bond film.
Yeah, I mean I would agree with that. And all in all, I enjoyed watching it. There's, I don't know, I definitely wouldn't put it in my top 5.
Has this softened your stance on Timothy Dalton?
I think so. I mean, because there's, it is more fun to watch, I guess. Like it's not really high art or anything, but at the same time, like you don't feel like he's angry at you all the time. Like he just,
it's his
like
most conventional Bond, that's for sure, out of the two.
Yeah, and I do like that, where it goes through the motions to the extent it has to be like, hey, this is James Bond. It's the same thing we've been doing. There's a little bit of a twist. Dalton is his first outing, I feel like, is more of a departure than, for instance, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And it's clearly more tailored for Dalton specifically than anybody else's first run, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's...
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's close, because like it's still, like you said, it still has goofy stuff. And when you say goofy stuff, like Dalton's not really doing anything goofy in it. You know what I mean? Like he is very serious and upset and F you to the establishment and fire me, I'll thank him for it kind of stuff. Like, but then he's surrounded by some goofy shit.
Killer Milkman.
Yeah, Killer Milkman. Man. Doom Patrol fame. But yeah, it's a good, like I said, it's a good start, and it's a shame though, because like you watch it now and you realize like he never really gets the fleshed out Bond movie. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, okay, well, Dalton's more serious. The moments he shines brightest in this movie are when he's kind of, cold behind the eyes and very intense, even with all the goofy stuff.
Turn out the lights.
Yeah. So then, with the next one, they're like, let's go full on. And I feel like, it's a shame, like, we never got the third one to kind of like balance it out. But I know, I think,
it's the Batman Returns scenario.
Well, if that was the case, then this would be my favorite Timothy Dalton movie. But like, yeah, I don't know. I enjoy. I think this is his. Like he just looks really good as Bond in this one. He gets to do more Bond things in this. He's still working for MI6 in this one. They get the return of the Aston Martin, in kind of a ridiculous, chase.
It's the most ridiculous thing that he does.
Yeah, like with what he gets a tire blown out and like cuts the hole in the ice and
that car chase is up there with what's the Brosnan one, as far as it's close as far as ridiculousness. And I feel like if they had the technical capacity to do some of the bullshit they did, it would have been full on crazy.
Yeah. Also, we have nothing to declare.
They always have the moment from the sizzle reel of like all the Bond films of him going "brace yourself" right as the car chase kicks in the high gear.
Oh yeah, that's like that, and then in License to Kill with the tilting the tanker.
Oh yeah,
those are like two prime Dalton moments.
Yeah,
and it's him in a vehicle.
But Rich, this is the first time you had seen this movie in years. How did it feel, kind of revisiting it?
I mean, it's an immensely forgettable film in the grand scheme of Bond. So, like, when you think of, for me, I think part of the reason that I forgot so much about it is just because there's nothing that really, there's nothing that's iconic in the film. You know what I mean? There's a lot of certain things that as I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, that was in this one. Oh yeah, I've seen that before. Now I remember that. But there's nothing like iconic in it. There's no, with Connery, I guess you could say that basically anything he did in Goldfinger. I mean, that whole movie just feels like one just set piece from set piece to set piece. With Lazenby, you kind of remember the ski chase, and certainly if nobody remembered it, they were reminded when Christopher Nolan filmed Inception.
Mm-hmm.
With Roger Moore, there's a lot of comedy and a lot of the funnier shtick type stuff that sticks out. With Brosnan, I'll always have that image of him in the tank. Him jumping off of the Hoover Dam. Or not the Hoover Dam, but whatever dam they were on. And then, with Daniel Craig, you've always got that image of him either sitting down at the card table or him kind of coming in on that float into Macau. So there's things that stick out. And before we sat down and watched, I was really trying to remember like what really stuck out to me in this movie. And there was nothing there. And it's a shame because I think Dalton's actually a great Bond. I think he plays the role fantastic. This is a movie that kind of lacked anything iconic, and I guess it didn't really have much cultural cachet of the earlier installments.
Well, it never, I remember whenever they, aired the Bond films, like the marathons around the holidays, I feel like both the Dalton films got the least rotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
And the many times I've watched this movie, I mean, obviously the Dalton era, which is only 2, but just in terms of most watched Bond in recent memory, it's been Dalton just because, you can knock out those 2 pretty easily. I mean, there really isn't anything, we mentioned the sizzle reel with the 2 moments, but Dalton, especially in this movie, doesn't really have that thing. I've always enjoyed,
For me, the standout sequence is him fighting Necros, the killer milkman, hanging from the cargo plane.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that stunt's insane.
Yeah. That's really it.
Yeah, but, you'd have to really talk to, some diehard Bond fans to pull that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, nobody's going to know that.
But that's another...
Yeah.
But I think that the point that I was trying to make is that that's something, having not seen the Dalton movies in such a long time, I can't remember if that was in Living Daylights or if that was in License to Kill.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. Again, you'd have to be really kind of a aficionado of the Dalton era to really kind of separate the two, because you can easily get lost in the middle there. Things that Dalton does in this movie that I've always enjoyed, he it's always nice because Moore takes when he does the Bond, James Bond, I mean, you could fit an entire movie between in that pause he gives, which is kind of his thing. That's kind of a classic Moore-ism. Dalton, I've always liked the first time he says it in this movie when he lands on that boat, he says it almost as an annoyance, real quick. He doesn't take a beat. It's not it's not an iconic thing for him. It's just his name. And they really start to they really lay on thick the beginnings of the I don't care about my standing in the MI6. It's a job that needs to be done. And that's something I think that they were smart to tap into with Dalton, because he has...
I would agree with that.
He has that...
I only kill professionals.
Yeah.
She didn't know one end of the rifle to the other.
Exactly, yeah.
It scared the living daylights out of him.
Yeah.
Winks at
he
the
gets
camera.
to say the fucking line. But... No, I mean it's a fun movie. I mean, like again, this is the. Would you say out of the two Dalton movies, like this is the one like you wouldn't necessarily introduce a Bond fan who hasn't seen Dalton movies, like if you had to pick between the two, like would you be like, hey, here's the Living Daylights, more kind of fun, more conventional Bond, and then License to Kill kind of like broke the mold in a way because it's really about as anti-Bond as you can get in terms of dealing with MI6 and dealing with, I mean, he hasn't been a rogue agent too many times that I can think of, So like Living Daylights, conventional Bond, it's solid, it's fun. Like when Sam, Rich, and I watched it, we had a fun time just like joking around with it, And there were moments where we're kind of, you're engaged, like you're saying the plane fight, the fight in the end.
Whitaker never does it for me as the big bad.
No,
probably because they don't reveal him until really late. And he doesn't do a lot. He's just like
I think that's also part of the reason why it's kind of forgettable, because the villain doesn't show up until halfway, 2/3 of the movie, and the plan's vague at best.
Yeah.
That the way that the story is told is like haphazard and kind of, I don't know, feels chopped together at points.
Very
like
convoluted. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this movie ought to have been shot like an episode of Leverage or something, where like it goes through and then they have the reveal and show how how Koskin got scammed. Where instead they walk in like in the hotel room. What's his name? Gimli is like, okay, then I must die, and then in the next scene he's still alive, and you're like, okay, now I know what's happening. It's not a thing where, I don't know. It just feels like they have there's so many intricacies to the plot where like they could have just run with it and then done a reveal later that like, oh no, the professor was alive all along or whatever, and they didn't do that.
Not at all. Yeah, and again, I do feel like the plot's almost like secondary to the whole thing. They're building it around set pieces, and they're like, let's make him darker and let's make him like more of a Cold War guy again.
Yeah.
What do we do? Well, there's this kind of Soviet defector, but not really, because he's defecting from everybody, and like there's an arms dealer involved, and there's Gimli, and we'll have him team up with the Mujahideen 2 years before Rambo. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's nothing particularly memorable about the bad guys. The plot itself isn't anything to write home to. It's just cool seeing Timothy Dalton in action, because it's kind of like after watching Roger Moore like get pretty close to his 60s and kind of go through the motions near the end of it, it's like, well, we need something new.
It was a perfect switch.
I think that's kind of what sticks out. Like, make no doubt about it, Timothy Dalton is an incredible actor, and he's an incredible James Bond. And I think that he's sticks out in such a good way, and he's so prominent in the film that it's kind of hard for a lot of other actors, especially the Bond girls in both of his movies, to really kind of step up to the plate and stand at the same level with him. So I think that also kind of makes the other characters forgettable, because he's just so prominent. And I don't want to say that he's stealing every scene he's in, but he's something that, if you were to watch Bond in order, you've never seen anything like him before. And like my eyes, the first time I saw him, were after watching the Connery movies, the Moore movies, the Craig movies, and the Brosnan movies. He's a Bond that commands every single scene that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that has to do. There is an intensity, even in the quiet moments, that he brings to the role. And Jake Jake always mentions that the dude treated the role like Shakespeare, like he would bring the Fleming books on set, and like, because he actively quoting from them, and like, this was a dude that classically trained Timothy Dalton, treating it as.
He brings that to every role, you watch. Like
even Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, well, the thing, like when you watch Flash Gordon, that dude treats it like the most serious shit. And I don't mean like other people were like bullshit, whatever, they don't care, but like he treated it like this is gospel. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's something that you can see with his Bond too. Like he just has a charisma and that, like we've said it a million times, but like that intensity that's there. it makes it interesting. You're just like, waiting for this guy to go off, and there's moments in this film like when his buddy gets killed at the fair or whatever, and he pops the balloon. Like it's the most intense balloon pop of all time.
Scares away a mom and her kid.
Yeah. But to me, he just looks like Bond. He got that kind of like the longer, sharper features in the face, and he's got that great voice.
More haunted eyes.
Yeah, definitely. I just love watching. It's just a shame that some of the two movies. I just love watching Timothy Dalton, but I especially love his portrayal of Bond. Like for me, it's just my favorite to watch, and I think. We'll never know for sure, but I feel like maybe if it was somebody else in the role, maybe this wouldn't be as fun and accessible. Because I think it's even though it's not an all-time favorite famous Bond movie with most fans, in terms of like the best of the actors that they put forward, compared to like License to Kill, would you consider it like an accessible Bond though? Like if someone had never seen a Bond movie and this was on. Or like this is the only Bond movie you had readily available. Would you feel comfortable being like, hey, watch this? Like, would this be a Bond movie you'd be fine with having somebody start to watch with who's never seen a James Bond movie before?
Oh yeah, I could name a ton of movies that I would not show if it was the only one that I had.
And it does hit most of the James Bond notes. I mean, you got the gadgets, you've got the. You've got the Bond girl. You've got this kind of globe-trotting scheme that requires him going all over the place and interacting with all these, different types of people to figure out what's going on and eventually resolve it. It's not, like we were saying, it's not exactly the best scheme ever in any Bond film. And a lot of the actors that he's sharing the screen with are kind of either lacking in presence altogether or just chewing through copious amounts of scenery.
Yeah.
Koskin especially is just like every time that guy opens his every time that guy opened his mouth, I was just
or Pushkin rather, or is it Pushkin or is it Koskov?
Pushkin is Gimli.
Oh, Koskov then.
Koskov, yeah, that guy. Whatever. He's so ridiculous I didn't even bother to remember his name, and I just watched it today. So, but like, yeah, I mean. Talking about, are you going to show this to somebody who's never seen a Bond film? And if I had to show it to somebody, if this was the Bond film I had to introduce somebody to, then yeah. But like,
well, yeah, that was more the thing. It's like I'm not saying it'd be like, hey, this is the first like out of your Blu-ray collection, but like if would you feel like satisfied of being like, hey, you know what, we're gonna watch Living Daylights? Like I feel like you could show some Living Daylights and they'd have a good time with it. You know what I mean? Who's never seen a Bond movie or just knows the basic idea.
And the other thing is that like this is, if you show them this is a Bond movie. Mm-hmm. Like if you were to show them and they're like, oh, what's James Bond like? And you're like, oh, well, I've got this, let's put it in. Like this gives you kind of the overview where some of the other Bond films, there's some bad ones that you'd be like, okay, keep in mind, a lot of them are better than this, or even some of the other ones that are, pretty good. The next one we're going to talk about this is not really a Bond film. You'd have to, be like, okay, this is kind of different and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Where this could serve as an introduction to the series as kind of, more or less the formula.
Yeah, I think that would work. Also, you guys keep calling him Gimli. He's Sala on this podcast. We only refer to him as Sala from the Indiana Jones franchise. So, going forth,
not the professor from Sliders, or Leonardo da Vinci from a single episode appearance in Star Trek Voyager.
Sala. Let's talk about the theme song because I really like the theme song a lot.
The one that gets me more than the theme song and one of the reasons why I'm like this movie is peak 80s is because they have at the very beginning they have that kind of like typical Bond background music that you expect while stuff's going on, with the semi-orchestral thing kind of feeling there, and then pretty quickly they start like. You notice that they've got like the muted drums and like the weird synthesizer stuff in the back. So it's like this kind of like half 80s, half Bond thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not exactly sure whether I like it or like hate it.
John Barry didn't. This is the last Bond film he scores.
Yeah.
Probably because of that. Apparently he also didn't like working with a-ha.
I heard that or I'd read that he wasn't a huge fan of working with a-ha. He's got a good theme out of it. I think it's a fine theme, you know. I would say it's my favorite of the two Dalton themes, but
I would agree with that.
that's just me.
On the
I don't think
topic
that's
of
just you.
Dalton, though, since we have a new Bond now, this was his third time kind of up because he was approached originally when he was too young, then he was approached again at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, but he didn't like the direction that the franchise was going in. Was there anyone else that was potentially on board to get this round?
Pierce Brosnan.
There we go.
Yeah, he was originally approached, and he was on because Remington Steele wasn't doing that well ratings-wise, and so he was like, hey, this show is probably going to get canceled. I can totally be James Bond. And because of the publicity surrounding that potential casting, the ratings skyrocketed for Remington Steele, and the network was like, guess what?
At like the last second.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, from what Pierce Brosnan said in, like, you know, that great Everything or Nothing documentary, it was like getting ready to go out, and like the phone rang like a minute before like the deadline announcement, and he was like, fuck, because you know, granted, hindsight's 2020, and he, you know, ends up going on to make a pretty damn great Bond and 3 other ones. But like, that's not fair. But like, you know, we all GoldenEye's the best, and then it's diminishing returns there. But also, speaking of weird music, I can't wait to get the GoldenEye when it sounds like they're just throwing pipes down fucking metal tunnels. Bow, 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 bow. They just like throw a synthesizer down the fucking like down like a laundry shaft.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
yeah,
stick it in the dryer.
Yeah.
The N64 soundtrack somehow sounds better
It
sometimes.
does. Bow, 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 bow.
And that's MIDI files. But yeah, it's they basically, the ratings skyrocketed for Remington Steele. The network, I think it was NBC, was like, oh, by the way, you're under contract, and we're gonna renew. Bye. And so he had to turn it down and film like 2 more seasons of Remington Steele, and he's just
probably
like,
just pissed the whole time.
yeah. And then once the novelty of him almost being James Bond wore off, they canceled this. I think like in the middle of Timothy Dalton's run.
Well, the crazy thing is, on the way home on a flight recently, I was watching The Rocketeer because I wanted to watch The Rocketeer while I was flying, and
As you do.
as I do, and you know, Timothy Dalton's obviously in it, that's the first thing I ever remember seeing Timothy Dalton in was The Rocketeer, as Neville Sinclair. But I remember watching that like recently, and every time I had to remind myself, like he was the big draw in that movie because he was still James Bond.
Technically, yeah.
You know, he was still contracted as James Bond when they made The Rocketeer. You know, I would have loved to at least got fucking a third one, man. Damn.
Property of a lady.
Yeah. 007 in New York.
You almost got Warhead 2020.
Yeah.
So
2008 AD or whatever McClory wanted to make.
A Warhead 2020. Which Pierce Brosnan was also linked to after he got fired from the role. But
It would have been Thunderball 3.
it would have been. I mean, yeah, it's just it's Bond tracking down a nuke. But I mean, the music, the theme's fine. It's very, like Garrett was saying, this is a very 80s. This is like perhaps I know we were talking about View to a Kill last time, perhaps being the quintessential 80s Bond film. This is probably the quintessential 80s Bond film.
really?
Would you still go View to a Kill?
80s. You mean like just being an 80s movie?
Or just representative of its time?
Yeah, okay. I mean, representative of its time, okay, I can see that for Living Daylights. Because, I mean, it's like...
Otherwise, you're working with Fear Eyes Only, which could have easily been a 70s film.
Yeah.
Octopussy, which just exists.
Yeah, I mean, like... Although, you know, License to Kill does scream like, you know... Like that, you know, 80s fighting,
Lethal Weapon.
You know, Lethal Weapon fighting, you know, against authority, going against drug cartels, ultra violent. Like that screams late 80s, like as much as anything else does. You know what I mean? Like this is like post, you know, RoboCop. You know, this is like,
if you think about it, License to Kill, and we can get more into this next time, but License to Kill is essentially James Bond versus Scarface.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
which is cool. But yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, I can buy that. I thought at first you were saying like the quintessential like 80s Bond movie as in terms like best, and I was like, View to a fucking Kill? The hell's the matter with you, boy? Get fucking Pepper back in here to smack you around a bit. Boy, you think that's the best movie ever? I'll smack you 3 times in the mouth. Eating cream corn for a week, boy. Oh man, kick your teeth in. But no, I enjoy this one. Because it's Dalton. Beautician and the Beast.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Dalton. I'll watch it.
Do you own Beautician?
That's the Fran
I don't.
Drescher movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't own that one.
Oh
no.
God.
But
Mr. Sheffield.
I had a roommate my first year of college. It was the second one, the one that we don't talk about as much.
The one that we really can't talk about as much.
Right. He used to watch fucking The Nanny all the time. And so I would wake up to like the odd hours of like the day or whatever.
Like my sister went on a kick and watched that show like nonstop.
Oh God.
And it was just nonstop The Nanny. Does she ever get with the rich dude? Is that the whole point?
Yeah,
is
she gets with the rich
is that the
dude.
Sam and Diane?
Just like she gets with fucking Timothy Dalton and the Beautician and the Beast.
Good.
Everybody gets with Timothy Dalton.
Mr. Pricklepants, is that him in Toy Story? That's his name, right? In Toy Story
3. Yeah. Which he also treats like Shakespeare.
Hell yeah, of course he does. Because it's T-Doll, baby. God, he's the best.
But yeah, this movie, I mean, it's
I'd be
fun.
afraid to meet him, though. I feel like he'd be so intense.
Yeah.
He'd be like, hello, and I'd be like, License to Kill? And he'll be like, oh, of course, James Bond, fuck you.
Leaves
No, the first movie I saw was The Rocketeer. No. Your death in that is fucking wild.
You make the Hollywood
Yeah,
song.
you're the reason it doesn't say Hollywoodland anymore. That movie's great.
Yeah, he's basically Errol Flynn.
Yeah, he's Errol Flynn. What's his final line?
Something about it's only the movies? Or?
Something like that. Where he's like, I'll see you in the movie. No, I can't remember what it is now, and I just fucking watched it, and it's going to drive me insane.
What's your favorite Timothy Dalton moment in this film?
Oh, when he gets hit in the head by the cello case and loses his goddamn mind for a second and breaks the fourth wall because he's getting ready to kill everyone on set. I pointed out to Rich. I was like, Rich, wait for it. I'm not insane. It's there. No, I like...
For those listening at home that don't, there's a scene when he puts the cello in the Aston Martin for the first time and it accidentally cold cocks him right in the fucking...
And he looks at the actress and, like, I swear to God at the camera, like, you fucking better have got that. I'm not doing this again. And you're like, he is a cold bastard killer. You know what? I'm stalling because I can't. Know. There's a lot. He has great chemistry with Q. Like, especially, obviously he gets more in License to Kill, but he's got great chemistry in this one as well.
With the Ghetto
Blaster.
Yeah. I like his money penny. I'm kind of bummed we didn't see more of his money penny.
Fair, yeah.
But anything in I mean
the car chase. I like him in the car chase.
Yeah,
like he keeps his cool, and I also like. I mean, I like the whole sniper exchange, like him going up and like that's a very James Bond, like going up.
Turn strawberry jam.
Yeah, sorry, jam of him. I was like, only he could say strawberry jam, like the fucking most metal line of all time. Like putting the rifle together and like with his thing, and
puts on the super glove and
it's fucking
It's like even his
the whole
quips
movie.
and one-liners sound angry.
Yeah.
Salt corrosion.
Yeah.
Got the boot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which then immediately like
And then he realizes the bomb's still on the plane. He's like, fuck.
You guys, how about you guys? What's your favorite Timothy Dalton moment in this flick?
I'd have to say I like the opening before the credits.
Oh, all the Gibraltar stuff.
Yep, yeah, I really liked all that stuff, and how the first time that he says James Bond, completely just glosses over it while he's laying on that woman's yacht.
As you do. Garrett.
I kind of like the scene in the hotel room when he's talking with Gimli, and he's like, if you and like Gimli's like, who do you trust? And he's, if I trusted him, we wouldn't be talking right now. Like you get the kind of sense where he's like, yeah, I'll pull this trigger if you make me, but if you give me a reason not to, then we can both walk out of this room.
I also like, we kind of mentioned earlier where he's like, his one buddy is like, that's fucking against the rules or whatever. And he's like, then they can fire me for it and I'll thank him. Like, that's such a great line. Like, and that's something that you maybe wouldn't totally believe, like a Roger Moore Bond wouldn't say that. Because Roger Moore's Bond loves being a fucking 00 agent.
Yeah, he loves his job.
Yeah.
And Connery loves it too.
Yeah.
Like, because Connery gets to get away with all that
They're
shit.
the company men.
Dalton, it's a job.
And it's a job he doesn't like.
Yeah, he's good at it.
He doesn't know anything else.
Yeah, but dropping that line, like if I was like a 12-year-old kid and I like had just seen like A View to a Kill, and I'm like, oh yeah, Bond, and I go see this one, and I'm like, I see this new thing the Dalton's about, and he's just like, they could fire him, and I thank him. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing this for? Like, it would have blown my mind. I'm like, he's not happy. Like, why isn't Bond happy? Like, why is he so goddamn sad? Like, that would have fucking blew my mind. I still love that line. Like, I love whenever I watch it with somebody, I'm always like waiting for their reaction. And most of the time they just sit there and their reaction doesn't change at all because they don't give a shit. They don't care about Bond. I'm like diving into this psyche. Like, he's so fucked up, man.
Well, I think that's kind of unique or awesome in that you can kind of watch him through the lens of this is the Bond that has been around the block. From the stand, like all of the baggage that, he would acquire from all of his previous missions and from being an orphan, from having his wife get murdered. Like, that's Timothy Dalton's Bond.
Yeah.
Where you don't really get that with Roger Moore or with Sean Connery.
Also, I remember Neville Sinclair before he jumps out, and I think Jenny Blake is like, it was all lies or whatever. And he's like, it wasn't lies, Jenny. It was acting. And he like flies off and, whoa, fuck, and then he explodes and he goes, ah, like they had to like film. I think that's the last line of one of them. But then they had to film that moment where like, all right, Timothy, now you're screaming, hurtling to your death, and the dude fucking sells it as he screams and like into the camera like, ah.
And knowing the way movies are made as we do, that means there's just an entire day of Timothy Dalton screaming
his fucking head off. And like, if I was Joe Johnston, I'd be like, all right, Timothy, I was like, sir, I'd call him like, Sir Timothy Dalton, come here. He's like, I'm not knighted, you prick. I'm like, just come here. I'm like, all right, so this scene, you're going to get really angry. You're like dying. He's like, yeah, I know. He's like, all right, the scream I want you to let out is a scream that I know that you wanted to let out when you got hit in the head by the cello case while filming The Living Daylights. He's like, you cheeky prick. You knew?
You know what scene, for me, this is the worst scene in the entire movie. Not The Rocketeer.
Okay, because there's no bad scenes in that movie.
Where is the rocket?
Yeah, where is it? Where's what? The rocket.
In The Living Daylights, when the busty Russian woman
oh yeah
kind of seduces the
smothers that man,
yeah, with her breasts.
Yeah.
Why is that there?
Yeah, that's a Roger Moore thing. That's like such a goofy Roger Moore moment, Yeah, I don't know. I can't help you on that one.
Every time I watch this movie, that's the moment where I'm like, why is it? You just send him down the pipe. The end. Yay. You don't need any of that.
Yeah. Also, remember when Sala gets like fake assassinated, and they don't tell he doesn't tell anybody, and his like wife's like sobbing over his corpse, and he just wakes up. He's like, "Get off!" Yeah, it's like he could have. I guess they needed to sell it, But I remember, like, as a kid, I was like, Squibs. Like, Squibs in a movie? Shit. Also, Timothy Dalton there's two actors who have really good shooting faces they make when they shoot, like really good posture and faces. One is Kevin Costner, especially in the movie Wyatt Earp. Watch that trailer if you don't believe me. Shit. The second is Timothy Dalton. Like he makes like his face is gonna explode with the fucking hammer that hits the round. You know, like he's especially during the scene where he goes to like quote unquote assassinate Sala. That's a great like pose. Also, I think his gun barrel sequence. I think he's the only Bond, if I can remember, that like, it seems to go out of his way to hide the fact that he has a gun in his other hand. Like when he walks, most of the other Bonds seem to like just sway naturally and like be kind of really like, oh, like, you know, they'll drop to the knee or like they're like really kind of like exaggerated, which whatever, it's the gun barrel sequence, it's famous. Dalton looks to have like be the only guy to like hide the fact that he's carrying a gun, if I remember correctly. You know what I mean? Like it looks very much like that his right arm doesn't move. You know, he's just like, oh, you know,
nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here, and then just shoots you in the head. So it's only going to get darker and more violent from here, boys.
Is there anything that takes you out of the
Bond? It's the James Bond nobody knew they wanted until 2006.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying he was ahead of his time.
He totally
absolutely is. Yeah,
which is a shame for him.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it's from interviews I've seen with Timothy Dalton. It seems to have been the perfect run for him because, like,
he got his two.
He's, you know, he has that great moment that when they do like the celebration of Bond. And they interview him. He's like, "It's always with me. Like Bond's always there. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, it's always a part of me, and I have great memories making it." Because, like, you know, he always talks about like seeing that billboard. And they had all the Bonds there except him. And he's like, "I'm free." Like, you know, so I feel like for someone of like that caliber and someone who's always interested in doing different roles and different acting challenges, as bummed as we might be, I feel like that kind of is the perfect run for Timothy Dalton. You know, he put his two pretty diverse, in terms of character, you know, in Bond. Like he gets the goofier-esque Bond, but he still plays it pretty straight, and then he gets like the straight up, arguably still the most violent Bond movie ever made. You know, so yeah, I just wish there was more.
Is there a moment that takes any, like I had mentioned, the busty woman?
I mean, that scene, yeah, I always forget that's there, and then I'm like, oh, that's right, it's here. It's kind of, you know, for me, honestly, the third act, it starts to fall apart kind of in the third act. It starts to unravel.
When he gets to Tangier.
Yeah, I mean, again, we get that amazing, like, you can't, like, there's no CG back then. You can't fake hanging out of the back of a plane. I mean, you can with, like, you know, when Dalton's in the green screen, stuff like that. But, like, when you watch that scene, the dudes have parachutes on. You know? Like, if they fall so they can parachute safely to the ground, you know? So, like, you know, people are getting, you know, rocked, cut loose, and hanging off the back of a plane. Like, that's so spectacular. But it kind of falls apart a little bit to me in that third act. And like you said, not a great villain, you know? And there's a couple. I mean, like, okay, yeah, you get, like, the weird... Like, they try to do, like, the Odd Job Jaws thing with having a guy that has explosive milk. Doesn't matter. Pointless.
He kills people with headphones while listening to The Pretenders.
Mm-hmm. And those headphones suck. That shit would just snap.
Yeah. All those people that die listening to Chrissy Hind.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you guys? Anything take you right out?
The busty woman scene.
Yeah, I mean that, and honestly, the what's his name, Whitaker. A lot of his stuff is just like, what?
Yeah. Why does he have a little wax boy that can light a real life cannon in the middle of his collector's hall?
The 80s.
Okay.
And doesn't what's his name have like all the wax figures that look like him?
Oh, like yeah, he's Napoleon and Hitler and Genghis Khan and yeah, Caesar.
Is Salah that goes over there and he's like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, none of the Necros is really the best bad guy, and only because he's like Mr. Blonde. He's like this like Aryan archetype that just hunts Bond, and you can tell this film is kind of like, hey, look how cool this actor is. And they honestly, the only thing I've seen that actor in outside of Living Daylights is Die Hard. He's the one that has written in his own blood, "Now I have a machine gun, ho ho ho,"
Ho,
across
ho,
his
ho.
chest.
Yep.
Yeah.
What if Bruce Willis was James Bond and they didn't even try to do an accent?
Yeah.
Like he just
Still got the jersey.
yeah. Welcome to the party, pal.
It's Blofeld. I took out all the bullets. Asshole.
Oh man, it's been a while since I watched the first Die Hard. I've never seen Die Hard 5, and one day I just want to watch it just to see, because I watched like a review of it, and it just looked like a nightmare.
Yeah. It's got
It's
Jai
bad.
Yeah, have you seen it?
Mallory and I saw it on Valentine's Day when it came out.
Oh shit.
It was awful.
Yeah, I like the fourth one was cool.
Third
The
one
fourth
is
one's really
third
good.
one's really good.
Oh yeah, but I mean like in terms of like
Newer.
Indiana Jones getting a fourth one, you're like, bleh, you know, like, but like the Live Free or Die Hard, like I got the Steel Book, like Best Buy one, where he actually says "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker" in it. Also, real quick before we go, I always like to tell the story of Bruce Willis, where he was on live television at a basketball game, and like Die Hard 4 was about to come out, and that one reporter, they must have been like, "Go over and say hi to Mr. Willis, we'll get him on air." He's like, "Hey, Mr. Willis, you're enjoying the game?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it's a good game." Blah, blah, blah. He's like, "Hey, you got a new movie coming out, playing John McClane again." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, well, enjoy the game, Mr. Willis, and yippee-ki-yay." And Bruce Willis grabs the mic and goes, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," like live on television.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, and they cut back. Like, "Whoa, okay, well, whoopsie daisy." Oh man, it was so good.
You actually saw the new Death Wish.
I saw the new Death Wish. Yeah, with Bruce Willis. Yeah, it kind of turned me around like on Willis, because like there was a stretch of period between like the Kevin Smith stuff and just like interviews him being nasty to people, which is like, dude, don't be nasty to people in the interviews, like especially when they're trying to do their job. Like if they're being a dick to you, that's one thing. And I was kind of like, man, that really bummed me out. Like I didn't watch Bruce Willis movies for like years because it just affected me. Like it shouldn't. Like I watched Mel Gibson movies, but I like the Bruce Willis stuff. I was like, what an asshole. So yeah, I'm not saying the new Death Wish movie was fantastic or anything, but I was like, man, I miss watching like Bruce Willis movies, like just fun Bruce Willis movies. And he was like, he had some charisma going on in that one. He didn't phone it in like I've seen some other stuff. So yeah,
I think it all just depends on the director. This one is directed by fucking Living Daylights, directed by John Glenn, who had directed all the other 80s Bond movies too. And it's interesting because we're watching this dude. I would argue he's getting better as a director as his run continues, but then I remember View to a Kill exists, and I'm like, oh, that's like smack dab in the middle.
Yeah, and that's kind of a series of unfortunate events, you know. Speaking of directors, we should mention, is it Lewis Gilbert?
Lewis Gilbert
has passed away since we've last all met and recorded.
Director of Garrett's favorite Bond film, Moonraker. Right. Also directed The Spy Who Loved Me and You Only Live Twice.
Yeah. I mean, a heck of a run. I mean, you know, The Spy Who Loved Me, we've all talked about how much we love it. I mean, I think there are days where that's my favorite James Bond movie, you know, just such a damn good
dude was like
for a James Bond movie. 97.
Yeah.
Like he was old, you know. But a great life, and they always, I think they said Sir Roger Moore, that was his favorite director to work with. But so it's a bummer, it's a loss in the Bond family, and like I said, definitely made his mark with those three films. Took Bond to space.
Technically, the first time we go into space is a Lewis Gilbert film, and You Only Live Twice.
That's true.
When the fucking spaceship eats the other spaceship.
Yeah, but they get like pew pew pew, like spinning around laser battles, just floating there, going, oh shit. But anyway,
dude loves vessels eating other vessels and loves outer space.
That's true, because that happens in Spy Who Loved Me, right?
That's like his signature. Like, what do we do?
Is there a vessel eating a vessel? No. Can we go to space? Yeah.
Yeah.
So rest in peace, Lewis Gilbert.
Yeah, thanks for the movies, man. I'm trying to think if he did any. I mean, clearly he did stuff outside of Bond.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you didn't do 3 movies in 97 years.
Yeah, and they're only Bond movies.
Yeah. I mean, if the only movie I ever directed was A Spy Who Loved Me, I'd be like, I'm fine.
If the only movie I ever directed was You Only Live Twice, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. Any Bond movie.
Yeah. View to a Kill.
Except Diamonds Are Forever, you fucks.
Is that still, like, as we're revisiting all of it?
No, I mean, I don't know. Like, that, it's almost become just too much fun not to, like, make that, like, such a thorn in my side. But, you know, I'm like, that one, fine. That one's the one.
Yeah, we only have one '80s Bond movie left, so we're moving.
The next 2 episodes are 2 pretty damn good Bond movies, I think.
I think, yeah. Well, Garrett, you're middling on License to Kill.
Yeah, it's not awful, but it's one of those films that, again, like, it's not really a Bond movie. It's kind of like, it's got James Bond, but it's something completely different. And
I'm just a fan of like the revenge movies, and that's just him like revenging, like hardcore.
Smile for the birdie,
yeah, you bastard. Oh yeah, we'll talk about Bond. One of Bond's biggest fuck ups in his history is in License to Kill.
Yeah,
in terms of being a bad secret agent. We'll leave you with that teaser.
Yeah.
Which, the last time Sam and I watched the movie, we looked at each other like, holy shit. You fucked up hard, man. God damn.
But yeah. So this has been another installment of From Geek Out with Love. I'm Sam.
I'm Jake.
I'm Rich.
I'm Garrett.
Goodbye, James Bond.
So fucking terrible. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.